One of the hopes of e-cigarettes when they first started was that they'd be a way to help people stop smoking regular cigarettes. It was a big hope. And what we wanted to do with this survey, with this review that we started this year, was to look at the very best evidence and the very top evidence of what's going on with this. Uncritically accepting the results of a single systematic review has risks. We often will look at a systematic review, one systematic review, oh, it's golden, it's special. It must say everything we need to know. But there's two major problems with any single systematic review. One is their decisions about which studies to include and which studies to exclude. And the other problem is the same problem with all science. Sometimes the methodology is not carried out in a robust way, so we end up with a weak study. So what have we done in our field now that we see that we have this problem? We've now set up a new form of methodology called umbrella reviews. We take the umbrella of all the research that we have, and we look at it together. Not just one systematic review, not just one meta-analysis, but what are all the reviews looking at in the top of the evidence pyramid. Maybe a little bit easier way than looking at a pyramid is to look at how the information flows when we do an umbrella review. We look at randomized controlled trials, maybe we look at cohort studies, case-controlled studies, we pick what studies we want to use, and then we go to that first level of synthesis, a systematic review or a meta-analysis. But as I just said, is that really the most reliable evidence or the most solid evidence we can do? So what we do next in an umbrella review is we gather them all together and we evaluate their quality and also their data. Looks kind of funny here in this last part. It says OOSR. That's Overview of Systematic Reviews. That's a general term that seems to be in some favor, but when you look it up in the literature, umbrella review is the main term. I much prefer it because we're not just overviewing what the systematic review said, we are synthesizing the evidence up to a tertiary level. This form of methodology is now gaining great speed inside the medical research community. There's lots of systematic reviews out there. What is going on? So now we have a preferred reporting items for overviews of reviews published in BMJ last year, which is usually a good starting point to say we've got a methodology. I have to admit I wasn't too happy with their anachronism prior, because in North America, a prior means that you've been arrested or convicted of a crime. But so they go. It's going to be the prior. So we started our systematic review on ends and cessation retrievals. We started with ones in 2021, and we went right up to August this year. That's 17 different systematic reviews in less than 2.5 years. The idea of registering a systematic review so we wouldn't duplicate efforts, it appears to be a big failure. But we do have these 17 that we found just from the 2.5 years. As you can see, they come from all over, but mostly from the developed countries, not completely. There is at least one from Indonesia. But here we have 17. So we've got 17 in front of us. What does that mean? Should we be trusting all of them? Should we be looking at all of them? And the answer is no. When we look at a rating tool called AmStar2, which has been in existence for over 15 years, very well used, very objective. It's not, did I like your review? It's, did you do this? Did you do that? Did you look at the right studies? Did you go in the right directions with your analysis? It sometimes is difficult. When I was first training, I learned when I was going to my research unit, pretend when you're critiquing someone that they're sitting right next to you. And this is where the objective AmStar 2 evaluation is very helpful. I can just point to the checklist and say, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, you didn't do this and that. So for the AmStar ratings, the one you see grayed out, are considered low or critically low confidence in their reviews. For our initial preliminary results, which I'm showing you today, we simply put them aside. When we do the full study, we will look at those and compare their results to the other studies and see what differences there are. But there are these. Of course, we see the familiar Cochrane review, what seems to be the gold standard, but they're not the only ones out there that have been doing the work. So, looking at these 5 systematic reviews, synthesizing them together and asking, what does this say to us about cessation and e-cigarettes? There's 2 areas we are looking at. One is the quit rates, and the other is comparative effectiveness. There is a good primary evidence base. I get kind of tired every so often of people saying there's not enough evidence yet. 21 randomized controlled trials were looked at between these 5 systematic reviews. Also, one of the systematic reviews looked at 18 longitudinal cohort studies. We're not talking cross-sectional one picture. We're talking about one point in time to the other, and we looked. So what kind of quit rates did we find in these 5 studies? At the high end, we found 44% of people at 6 months who switched to e-cigarettes had actually quit cigarettes. At the low end, it was down to 14% at 12 months, but that was among a group with no intention to quit. That was spontaneous quitting. Boy, what a gift that is. Could we only see more of it? So we look overall, and as one of the other speakers said too, the general trend for quit rate success is about 10%. It's heartbreaking. That's why we need harm reduction, because even those who try can't seem to quit. On the other side, the cohort meta-analysis didn't find any significant difference in quit rates between the groups. No improvement, but very importantly to remember, no detriment. I am very perturbed when I hear the negative media press saying, oh, e-cigarettes suppress cessation. At worst, they make no difference. Why is there a difference between the cohort studies and the RCTs? It's probably a question of being observed. In an RCT, you are in a lab, you are in a study, people are paying attention to you, you're thinking about what you're doing, and now, maybe I should be changing. With a cohort study where we're not making any intervention at all, this is just the luck of the draw. So there is no improvement in the real world studies, there is no detriment. There is improvement when we look at the RCTs, which is what we'll turn to next. Comparative effectiveness. Here is where we see a lot of positive news. When we look at nicotine ends, and I like to call them ends because I like to see them end smoking, versus just behavioral no support, ends were 161 significantly more effective than having no treatment or simply a behavioral treatment. That's nearly double what we do. Even at the lowest end of the statistical comparison, it's still 44% more effective to be using ends to quit than not having any support or just a behavioral one. Another area that's been of great concern is NRTs. 2 systematic reviews, when we put them together, found that ends were 65% more effective than an NRT in helping you to quit. Even at the low end of the scale, that's 21% improvement in effectiveness. We love that. One of the reviews did show no significant difference in the effectiveness. It went from 3% less effective to 109% more effective, but do not be fooled. If we're looking at statistics, non-significant is non-significant. Don't tell me there's a trend towards significance. No, it's simply not significant. When we do the final study, we will combine these 3 systematic reviews together. It will bring down the effectiveness rate, but it will be a larger sample of studies. Another one that was very interesting was ends versus any sort of treatment in a trial, and ends were 55% significantly more effective. Even at the lowest level, 12% more effective. Look at these things. So you have treatment decisions to make. What should we be promoting? ENDS should be promoted because they have been proven in RCTs to be more effective than other treatments we have at our disposal. Also, we might like to think that maybe a good part of what ENDS is doing is the behavioral substitution, but that doesn't seem to be the case. In 2 of the systematic reviews, nicotine ENDS were 75% more effective than just having non-nicotine ENDS. So the behavioral support seems to be there to some degree, but not as much as we might like. I particularly want to point out a study that was just published by Levitt this August. It's a very high bar that they chose for their 5 RCTs. You had to be 6 months continuous abstinence, not 7-day points prevalence, not at the last time we talked to you, but 6 months. Also, it had to be biochemically verified. I'm not going to take your word for it. You told me that you had quit. I'm going to check with a breathalyzer or other test. And in these 5 studies that met the highest bar from a study that we have great confidence in, ENDS were 77% more effective than any other treatment that was being checked. That's a lot of improvement, and we need any sort of improvement we can get in cessation. And if ENDS can offer that pathway, then it needs to be an option. Our funders want us to have impact. It's important. It's important that we're able to say what's going on. So when we have our final study done the end of this year and get it published in a journal with help willing from kind editors and peer reviewers, the first thing Umbrella Review does, it's a one-stop shop for your policymakers and clinicians. Every last study is listed in what's called a citation index. That's why I know there's 21 RCTs out there, and when I start looking at the other ones, there's probably other ones out there for me to look at. A one-stop shop. You can find it all here. You don't have to go looking around. You don't have to do a search. It's all here. Another important part, as I talked about earlier, was identification of the best quality systematic reviews. People like to pick and choose. Oh, this systematic review agrees with what my position is. That's not good enough. We need to know if it was a good study. Was it a study that we can have confidence in? Was it done in a sloppy manner? Was it done well? Another thing which I didn't have time to talk about today was an empirical discussion of reporting and spin bias. You have your results at the end of your systematic review, but now you're talking about them in a somewhat different way. A lot of the kinds of comments is when they find results they don't like, they might not be reported. Or they might say, oh, we need more evidence. Maybe we don't. Maybe we have enough studies. But there's a lot of spin bias out there. There's a lot of looking. I don't know about you. I've been in this field 10 years now. I can just look at the author list and know what direction they feel about ENDS. It shouldn't be that way. We should just be looking at the science. And this year, when I looked at those improvement rates in quits with ENDS, that's evidence. That's not my opinion. Another thing that we want with the impact is to point to future research needs, something we always do. Of course, in this preliminary one, I haven't pointed out where these studies are coming from. Do we have enough studies from other countries? Do we have it from different age groups and different tobacco type uses? We need to point to future research needs where there's not enough evidence yet. But I will continue to say we have enough evidence now. We don't have to guess. So I thank you all for your time. I'd like to thank my researchers, Juicy La Rosa and Marie Bukola Itole from Nigeria. We work remotely. I stay in Victoria, Canada. Juicy's in Italy, and Bukola is in Nigeria. We have to get used to working in distributed teams. This is particularly where we don't have to be in a lab. We have to learn new ways to work together. Just like looking in the Zoom camera, there's over at the foundation, there's an interview for me in April, and oh, I'm so ashamed of it. I'm looking this way, I'm looking that way, because I didn't have a person in front of me. When I have you in front of me, I see your faces, I see your smiles, I see your cell phones. but at least I can make some connection. We have to learn how to do better, and there'll be more and more conferences where I don't feel like traveling 22 hours to come and talk to you. So we have to learn how to be that. Of course, I'd like to thank the foundation for their funding. I'd like to thank COER, the Center of Excellence for the Acceleration of Harm Reduction, our director, Dr. Lee Volti. He guided us through some very turbulent times when COVID hit Italy very hard. I also like to thank Dr. Riccardo Pelosa, well known to all of us for his long-term work in this field. And I thank you for your time and consideration, and I look forward to any questions. Thank you.